A poor single mom falls asleep on a beautiful man's shoulder, on a flight, but wakes up shocked when... Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The crying pierced through the airplane cabin like a siren. Heads turned. A few passengers sighed in irritation. A young woman in seat 23B whispered desperate apologies as she bounced a restless baby against her shoulder. Her name was Rachel Martinez, 24 years old, mother of a 6-month-old daughter named Sophia. Her flight from Los Angeles to Chicago was supposed to be a hopeful trip. Her sister was getting married, and Rachel had saved for months just to afford the cheapest ticket. But now, exhaustion pressed behind her eyes, and every cry from her baby felt like another reminder that life had become an uphill climb. The flight attendant gave her a tight smile that was not kind at all. "Ma'am, please try to calm your child." Rachel nodded, her throat dry. She had already tried everything, rocking, singing, walking up and down the aisle. Nothing worked. Around her, people looked away, pretending not to see. The hum of the engine filled the silence between her whispered pleas and the soft sobs of her baby. She thought about her job at the diner, about the rent due next week, about how tired she was of always apologizing for existing. When her baby's cries grew louder, Rachel bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. "Please, sweetheart, just sleep," she whispered. The man in the next seat shifted slightly. She expected another annoyed glance. Instead, a calm voice spoke. "May I try something?" She turned, startled. The man looked to be in his early 30s, tall even while seated, dressed in a tailored navy suit that did not belong in economy class. His eyes were the kind of blue that seemed to hold patience instead of judgment. "My sister has 3 kids," he said softly. Sometimes a new voice helps. Rachel hesitated, instinctively protective, but the warmth in his tone disarmed her. "Okay," she murmured. He extended his arms, and she gently handed over Sophia, her heart pounding. Within moments, the baby quieted. The man began to hum a low, steady tune that vibrated gently through his chest. Rachel stared, amazed. For the first time in hours, peace settled around them. The cabin relaxed too, passengers easing back into their seats. Rachel blinked back tears. "How did you do that?" she asked quietly. He smiled, eyes still on the baby. "Sometimes they just need a little kindness. We all do." The plane's overhead lights dimmed. Outside, night stretched endless and dark. Rachel leaned back, her body heavy with gratitude. The stranger's shoulder brushed hers warm, steady, safe. She did not mean to fall asleep, but exhaustion pulled her under like a tide. When the baby monitor app on her phone pinged softly, the man reached over, adjusted the blanket around Sophia, and looked down at the sleeping mother beside him. A faint smile touched his lips. He murmured, almost to himself, "You remind me of someone." The plane continued to glide through the dark sky, unaware that this accidental meeting between 2 strangers, one weary, one powerful, was about to change both of their lives forever. The first rays of dawn began to creep through the airplane windows, painting the cabin in pale gold. Rachel stirred in her seat, her neck aching slightly. Her head rested against the man's shoulder. For one peaceful moment, she did not move. The hum of the engines mixed with the soft breathing of her baby, still asleep in her arms. It felt like a dream, fragile and warm, a moment that did not belong to the chaos of her real life. Then reality returned, sharp and cold. She straightened quickly, embarrassed. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I must have fallen asleep." The man smiled, his voice still calm. "It is fine. You looked like you needed it." Rachel's cheeks flushed. "Thank you, for everything. I do not even know your name." "James," he said simply, offering his hand. "And you are Rachel, right? I heard the flight attendant call your name earlier." She shook his hand, surprised that he had noticed. "Yes, Rachel Martinez." Her daughter made a small sound, and Rachel adjusted the blanket around her. James watched, something soft flickering in his eyes. "How old is she?" 6 months, Rachel replied, smiling faintly. "Her name is Sophia. She has my stubbornness already. James chuckled quietly. That is not always a bad thing. For a moment, there was a comfortable silence. Outside, clouds rolled past like mountains of cotton. Rachel dared to glance at him again. His suit was slightly wrinkled from sleep, but he still looked composed. There was an air about him someone used to control, used to people listening when he spoke. But here, sitting beside her, he seemed different, human, gentle. "You travel often?" she asked. "Too often," he replied. "Work takes me everywhere, but lately it feels like nowhere matters." His tone carried something tired beneath the surface. Rachel understood that feeling all too well. "I know what you mean," she said quietly. "Sometimes it feels like life is just surviving." James nodded, as if her words hit closer than she knew. The captain's voice came over the speaker, announcing their descent into Chicago. The cabin came alive again with the rustle of passengers and the sound of seatbelts clicking. Rachel began gathering her things, a diaper bag, a small bottle, a worn jacket that smelled faintly of baby powder. James reached up and took down her overhead bag before she could stand. "You do not have to," she began, but he shook his head. "It is okay. Let me help." The kindness in his gesture caught her off guard. She had grown used to doing everything alone, to brushing off offers because they usually came with strings attached. This man's help felt different, simple, unspoken, decent. When the plane landed, the seatbelt light went off, and people began pushing toward the exit. Rachel held Sophia close as they moved down the aisle. James followed behind, carrying her bag without being asked. At the gate, he handed it back to her. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I mean it. Most people would have just ignored me." He smiled again, that same calm, unreadable smile. "You do not owe me thanks, Rachel. Just take care of that little one." Something in his voice made her heart tighten. "Safe travels," she said. "You too." Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the noise and motion of the airport. Rachel stood still for a moment, feeling an odd emptiness settle in her chest. She looked down at Sophia, who blinked sleepily at the bright terminal lights. "Well, baby girl," she whispered, "some people really are kind." She adjusted the strap of her bag and headed for baggage claim. What she did not see was James, standing a short distance away near a column, watching her go. A man in a dark suit approached him and spoke quietly. "Sir, the car is ready." James nodded slowly, his eyes still following the young mother as she disappeared into the crowd. "Have someone find out her story," he said softly, discreetly. The assistant hesitated. "Her story, sir?" "Yes," James replied, his tone thoughtful. "I want to know who she is." The assistant nodded and walked off, leaving James standing alone in the terminal, lost in thought. He did not understand why he cared. It had been years since anything stirred something real in him. But the sight of that exhausted young mother, holding her child and still managing to smile, had reminded him of something he had long forgotten what it meant to feel human. As Rachel stepped into the crisp Chicago morning, unaware that the stranger from the plane was not just a kind traveler, but someone whose world reached far beyond hers. The day stretched ahead, ordinary and quiet. Yet destiny had already begun to turn its silent wheels. The morning air outside O'Hare International Airport carried the chill of early spring, crisp enough to make Rachel pull her worn jacket tighter around herself. She shifted Sophia's weight in her arms and looked around for the airport shuttle that would take her to the train station. Her sister's house was nearly 30 miles away, and every dollar counted, so the train was the only option. The crowd moved fast around her, business travelers with rolling suitcases, couples returning from vacations, families greeting one another with laughter. Rachel felt invisible among them, just another tired mother trying to make it through the day. Sophia stirred, fussing softly. "I know, baby. Just a little longer," Rachel murmured, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. By the time they reached the train platform, her arms ached, and her stomach reminded her that she had not eaten since the night before. She bought a small coffee and a muffin with her last few bills and sat by the window. The world outside blurred as the train began to move. Chicago's skyline sparkled in the distance, steel and glass stretching toward the clouds. Rachel stared at it, wondering if somewhere in one of those tall buildings, people like James lived their polished, perfect lives. She smiled faintly at the thought, realizing how ridiculous it was. He was probably a lawyer or a businessman who had already forgotten her name. Still, a part of her replayed his voice in her head, that calm warmth when he said, "Sometimes they just need a little kindness." For a brief moment, it made her believe the world was not all cold edges and locked doors. At the same time, across the city, James sat in the back of a black car, watching the morning unfold through tinted windows. His assistant, a man named Carter, tapped at a tablet. "Her name is Rachel Martinez," Carter said. "Age 24, single mother, works as a waitress at a diner in East Los Angeles. She was laid off from an office job last year. Her family is small, just one sister here in Chicago." James listened in silence. "She is not someone looking for favors, sir," Carter continued. "Her record shows she has refused several charity programs, even when she qualified. She works hard, pays her rent late sometimes, but always pays." James nodded slowly. "That sounds like her." He leaned back against the seat, staring out the window. "Keep this quiet. I just wanted to know." Carter hesitated. "Should I arrange something to help her?" "Not yet," James said. "If life brings her back into mine, I will know what to do." The car turned toward the heart of downtown, where the tall glass tower of Meridian Technologies rose above the street. The name James Whitmore was etched in silver on the building's main plaque. Inside the lobby, employees greeted him with polite smiles, unaware that their powerful CEO had spent the night in economy class beside a struggling mother and her baby. As he stepped into the elevator, James caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. The image of the tired but gentle woman from the plane crossed his mind again. He wondered what it was about her that refused to fade. Back on the train, Rachel arrived at her sister's stop and stepped out into the cold. Her sister, Carmen, waved from the parking lot, her wedding dress visible in the back seat of the car. "Rachel, you made it," Carmen said, hugging her tightly. "You look exhausted. Come on, let's get you both home." Rachel smiled, relief flooding her chest. For the first time in months, she was not alone. That night, after helping with last-minute wedding preparations, she tucked Sophia into a borrowed crib and sat by the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. Her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Rachel, I hope you and Sophia got home safely. It was good meeting you. James." Her heart skipped. How had he gotten her number? Then she remembered she had written it on a luggage tag that he might have seen when he handed her bag back at the airport. She typed a simple reply. "We did. Thank you again. Safe travels." She stared at the screen for a moment longer, then turned it face down beside the bed. In the darkness, Sophia stirred and let out a sleepy sigh. Rachel brushed a hand over her daughter's hair and whispered, "Maybe not everyone forgets." Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars, unaware that two lives, one powerful, one fragile, had just crossed paths in a way that neither of them could yet understand. And somewhere high above, in a penthouse suite overlooking the skyline, James sat alone at his desk, scrolling through old emails he barely read, thinking of a woman and her child who had reminded him that kindness was not weakness, it was strength. 2 weeks passed since the flight, yet the memory of that night lingered in Rachel's mind, like a melody she could not forget. Life at her sister's house had been noisy but comforting. Carmen's wedding had gone beautifully, filled with laughter and tears, a brief pause in the storm of Rachel's struggles. But now, with the celebration over, she faced the question that never left her. What came next? Her savings were nearly gone, and she needed a job before returning home. One afternoon, she sat in a small coffee shop near downtown Chicago, laptop open, baby monitor app running on her phone beside it. Sophia slept in a stroller next to her, her tiny fists curled near her face. Rachel scrolled through endless job listings. Waitress, cashier, temporary receptionist. None paid enough to cover rent, childcare, and bills. She took a sip of coffee that had long gone cold and sighed softly. That was when she noticed a small flyer posted near the counter. "Hiring temporary staff. Meridian Technologies, downtown Chicago. Apply in person." Rachel frowned. Meridian Technologies. She remembered that name. It had been printed on the sleek card that hung from James's luggage tag on the flight. She hesitated, telling herself it could not be the same company. Still, curiosity tugged at her. What could it hurt to try? She whispered to herself. The next morning, dressed in her best blouse and black slacks, she rode the train downtown. She left Sophia with Carmen, kissed her daughter's forehead, and promised to be back by noon. The Meridian Tower rose like a glass mountain above the city. Its mirrored surface reflected the clouds, making it look almost unreal. Rachel stood at the entrance for a moment, adjusting her coat, feeling painfully out of place among the men and women in tailored suits. Inside the lobby, everything gleamed. Marble floors, modern art, polished chrome. The receptionist looked up with a polite but distant smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I saw a flyer about temporary staff," Rachel said. "I was hoping to apply." "Of course," the receptionist replied. "Please fill this out and take a seat." Rachel filled the application carefully, aware of how ordinary her resume looked next to the others waiting nearby. A man in a sharp grey suit whispered something to the receptionist, who nodded and picked up the phone. Rachel paid no attention. She was too focused on double-checking her form. When her name was finally called, she followed an assistant through a hallway lined with framed photos of innovation awards. The assistant opened the door to a meeting room and said, "Mr. Whitmore will be with you shortly." Rachel froze. The name struck her like a spark. Whitmore, James Whitmore. It could not be. She took a breath, heart pounding. The door opened behind her, and the familiar voice she had replayed in her mind for days filled the room. "Rachel?" She turned. There he was, James, the stranger from the plane, though now he looked completely different. The casual warmth was gone, replaced by the composed authority of a man used to commanding attention. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, and his expression flickered between surprise and something unreadable. I did not know this was your company," Rachel stammered. "I saw a flyer and thought—" "I am glad you came," he interrupted gently. "I did not expect to see you again, but maybe fate had other plans." Her cheeks flushed. "I just need a job, Mr. Whitmore. I do not want any favors." His mouth curved slightly. "I know. That is why I am offering you a real position. We have a project that needs temporary accounting support. I remembered you mentioned working in that field." Rachel blinked. "You remembered that?" "I remember more than you think," he said quietly. For a moment, silence hung between them, filled with something that was not just gratitude. "You can start tomorrow if you want," he added. "Part-time, flexible hours." Rachel's throat tightened with relief. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I will not disappoint you." "I am sure you will not," he replied. As she left the office, her heart raced. It felt unreal, almost like another chance handed to her by the same man she had met by accident. James watched her go, hands in his pockets, the ghost of a smile on his lips. Carter entered the room seconds later. "You found her again?" he said. James nodded slowly. "No," he replied. "She found me." Outside, Rachel stepped into the bright city sunlight, unaware that her life had just shifted again, and that the man who had once been a stranger on a plane would soon change everything she believed about destiny. The next morning, Rachel arrived at Meridian Technologies 15 minutes early, her heart pounding as she stood before the glass doors. She had borrowed a clean blouse from her sister, pressed it the night before, and tied her hair neatly into a bun. She wanted to look professional, even if her shoes were worn at the edges. The receptionist greeted her kindly this time, perhaps already informed by someone in upper management. "Good morning, Miss Martinez. Mr. Whitmore's assistant will take you to your department." The words felt surreal. She followed a young woman named Claire through a maze of hallways until they reached a bright, open office filled with quiet typing and low conversation. Rachel's desk was tucked in a corner near the window. "You will be helping with data entries for the quarterly reports," Claire explained. "The system is simple. Take your time. If you need anything, just ask." Rachel nodded gratefully. As she settled in, she glanced out the window at the city skyline, glittering beyond. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of direction, as though life had stopped pushing her backward. Across the building, in the top-floor executive suite, James reviewed a presentation while his mind wandered elsewhere. He caught himself staring at the glass wall that overlooked the floors below. Somewhere down there, Rachel was working, completely unaware that her presence had shifted something inside him he could not name. His assistant Carter entered quietly. "Sir, the board meeting has been moved to 2 in the afternoon," he said. "Also, the accounting department mentioned you personally approved a temporary hire." James looked up. "Yes, Rachel Martinez. Is there a problem?" "Not at all," Carter replied, though curiosity flickered in his eyes. "It is just unusual." "Then let it stay that way," James said, returning to his notes. Hours passed quickly for Rachel. The work was steady and detailed, numbers flowing across the screen, the kind of task that required focus but allowed her thoughts to drift now and then to Sophia. Around noon, she went to the company cafeteria, holding a modest lunch she had packed from home. The space was large and modern, with sleek tables and floor-to-ceiling windows. Most employees sat in groups, laughing or checking their phones. Rachel chose a quiet corner by herself. As she ate, she overheard two employees talking nearby. "Did you hear? The CEO is back from New York," one said. "Apparently, he is impossible to read. Some say he is cold, others say he is actually decent. I will believe it when I see it," the other replied. "People like him do not notice anyone below their level." Rachel smiled faintly to herself, thinking of the man who had once rocked her baby to sleep 30,000 feet above the ground. If only they knew. When she returned to her desk, she found a sticky note on her keyboard. It was from Claire. "Mr. Whitmore wants to see you in his office at 3. Her heart jumped. She checked the clock 15 minutes. She straightened her blouse, took a deep breath, and walked toward the elevator. When she entered the executive floor, the atmosphere changed instantly. The air felt cooler, the space quieter. The receptionist gestured toward a set of glass doors. "You can go in. He is expecting you." Inside, James stood near the window, hands in his pockets. The sunlight outlined his frame, casting long shadows across the room. He turned when she entered, his expression softening. "Rachel, how was your first day?" "Good, sir," she said carefully. "Thank you for the opportunity. Please, drop the sir. You do not have to be formal with me." His tone was gentle, disarming. "I wanted to check how you were adjusting. We can make the schedule flexible if needed for your daughter." She blinked, surprised. "How did you know? You mentioned her on the plane," he said quickly. "I just remembered." Rachel felt warmth creep into her chest. "That is very kind of you." "Kindness is underrated in business," he replied with a small smile. "Do not hesitate to reach out if you need help." "I will not," she promised. As she turned to leave, he added quietly, "Rachel, it is good to see you again." She paused, unsure how to respond, then nodded and stepped out. Back at her desk, her hands trembled slightly as she resumed typing. She did not know what this strange connection meant or where it would lead. All she knew was that, for the first time in years, someone powerful had looked at her not as a burden, but as a person worth noticing. Upstairs, James watched her from his office screen, a faint trace of a smile returning to his face as he whispered to himself, "Sometimes fate knows exactly what it is doing." By the end of her first week at Meridian Technologies, Rachel had begun to find her rhythm. She arrived early every morning, often with a small cup of coffee in hand, and left just before sunset when the city lights started to glow against the glass towers outside. The numbers on her screen began to make sense, and her reports were clean, organized, and precise. Her co-workers noticed her quiet diligence. Claire, the assistant who had trained her, occasionally stopped by her desk with a smile. "You are doing great, Rachel. I think the team really likes having you here." Rachel smiled back, grateful for the small encouragement. Still, part of her stayed cautious. This was a world she did not belong to, a place of sleek laptops and quiet conversations about investments and markets she had never heard of. She kept her head down, did her work, and avoided drawing attention. What she did not know was that attention had already found her. In the executive office upstairs, James reviewed department performance reports. When he came across her name on the temporary staff list, he paused. The metrics beside her stood out accurate, consistent, flawless. "She is doing well," he murmured. Carter, who stood nearby, glanced at the file. "She is efficient, sir. The accounting lead said she stays late to finish every task. They want to extend her contract." James nodded slowly. "Make sure they do." Quietly, no announcement. Carter raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The following Monday, Rachel arrived to find a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a formal letter from Human Resources, confirming an extension of her position for 3 more months with a slight pay raise. Her hands trembled as she read it. She whispered a quiet thank you under her breath, her heart swelling with relief. That evening, when she picked up Sophia from Carmen's house, she held her daughter close. "We are going to be okay, sweetheart," she said softly. "Mama has work now." Over the next few days, Rachel began to relax a little. The office became familiar territory. She learned which elevators moved faster, which coffee machine worked best, and which colleagues were genuinely kind. Still, She rarely saw James. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him in the hallway, surrounded by executives, his posture straight and his expression unreadable. Yet every time their eyes met, just for a second, it felt like something unspoken passed between them, recognition, maybe even warmth. One afternoon, near the end of the workday, Rachel stayed late to finish a report. The office lights had dimmed, and most employees had already gone home. She was typing quietly when she heard footsteps behind her. "You should not still be here," James's familiar voice said. She turned, startled. "Mr. Whitmore, I mean, James. I was just finishing this last section." "You have already gone above and beyond," he said, glancing at her screen. "You do not have to prove anything." "I am just trying to do my best," she said with a shy smile. "That is all anyone can do." He nodded. "You remind me of someone I used to know. She worked harder than anyone else, even when the world gave her nothing in return." Rachel hesitated, sensing a heaviness in his tone. "What happened to her?" He looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "I failed her," he said quietly. "I was too focused on success to see what really mattered." The silence that followed was soft but full of understanding. Rachel wanted to say something comforting but found no words strong enough. Instead, she said gently, "Maybe you have a chance to make things right, with someone else." He turned toward her, his expression shifting into something unreadable but deeply human. "Maybe I do." At that moment, Claire's voice echoed down the hallway, calling goodnight. Rachel straightened, realizing how late it had become. "I should go," she said quickly. "My sister is watching my daughter." "Let me walk you to the lobby," he offered. She hesitated but nodded. They walked side by side in quiet harmony. When they reached the front doors, he said softly, "You are doing an incredible job, Rachel. I hope you know that." She smiled, touched. "Thank you. That means a lot." As she stepped into the cool evening air, Rachel did not notice the way he lingered behind, watching her disappear into the city crowd. He had seen many talented people in his life, but none who carried quiet strength the way she did. In her eyes, he saw something he had not seen in years, hope that refused to die, no matter how hard life tried to break it. The days turned into weeks, and Rachel's presence at Meridian Technologies became something steady, almost natural. Her small desk in the corner was now decorated with a framed photo of Sophia, her daughter smiling with two tiny teeth showing. Every morning, Rachel arrived before the others, logged in quietly, and lost herself in numbers that slowly began to tell stories of their own. She loved the rhythm of it, the peace that came with purpose. She had not felt that peace in a very long time. One Thursday afternoon, a sudden announcement stirred the office. The company was hosting a quarterly staff appreciation event that evening in the main atrium. Food, music, speeches. Attendance was optional but encouraged. Rachel hesitated. She did not own anything formal enough for an event like that, but Claire nudged her with a grin. "Come on, Rachel. You deserve to celebrate a little. Everyone knows how hard you have worked." Rachel smiled faintly. "I will think about it." That night, she returned home and checked on Sophia, who was already sleeping soundly. Carmen walked in, carrying folded laundry. "You should go," her sister said. "You spend all your time working or worrying. Maybe it is time to just breathe for a change." Rachel hesitated but finally nodded. She borrowed a simple navy dress from Carmen, brushed her hair, and caught the late train back into the city. The atrium was glowing when she arrived. Soft golden lights reflected off glass walls, music played softly, and tables were lined with food she could barely name. She stood near the edge of the crowd, feeling both invisible and safe in the background. Then, from across the room, she saw him. James stood at the center of the event, surrounded by board members and department heads, his suit perfectly tailored, his presence commanding. Yet when his eyes swept the crowd and found hers, the noise around them seemed to fade. He excused himself politely from the group and walked toward her. Rachel's heart raced. "You came," he said, his voice calm but clearly pleased. "Claire insisted," she replied with a shy smile. "I did not want to intrude." "You belong here as much as anyone," he said. "More than most." She laughed softly. "I doubt that." "Then allow me to prove it," he said, offering her a small plate of food. She hesitated, then took it. "You really are not like other CEOs," she teased. "Most would not even notice someone like me at their own event." "Maybe that is the problem with most CEOs," he said with a half smile. For a while, they talked about simple things, the company, the weather, her daughter. She told him about Sophia's recent attempt to crawl, about the tiny laugh that filled their apartment. He listened, genuinely interested. Around them, people glanced curiously, surprised to see their usually distant CEO speaking so easily with a junior employee. As the evening went on, the lights dimmed for a short speech. James was called to the stage. "Excuse me," he said softly, and she nodded. When he stepped up to the microphone, his voice carried steady and low. "This company was built on innovation," he said, "but what keeps it alive are people, the ones who show up every day, often unseen, who give more than they take." His gaze flicked briefly to Rachel. "To those people I say thank you. You are the heart of this place." The crowd applauded. Rachel felt her throat tighten. After the speech, she quietly made her way to the exit, not wanting to draw attention. But before she reached the doors, she heard his voice again. "Leaving already?" She turned. He was standing just behind her, holding 2 cups of coffee instead of champagne. "I thought you might prefer this," he said. She took it, smiling. "You remember everything, do you not?" "Only the things worth remembering," he said softly. They stood for a quiet moment, the noise of the event fading behind them. Rachel glanced down, her fingers brushing the cup. "You should get back. People are waiting for you." "They can wait a minute," he said simply. Something in his tone made her look up, and for a moment, neither spoke. It was not grand or dramatic, just a quiet understanding between 2 people from very different worlds who somehow saw the same thing in each other, kindness that did not need explanation. When she finally walked away, her heart was unsteady but warm. James watched her go, the faintest smile on his face, knowing that the line between coincidence and fate had just become even harder to see. The following week began quietly, the echo of the company event still lingering in Rachel's thoughts. She replayed James's words in her mind, unsure whether they were meant for her or simply part of his speech. Either way, they had stirred something she had kept buried for years, a fragile sense of worth. Work at Meridian Technologies returned to its usual rhythm, but beneath that calm routine, something was changing. Her co-workers had begun to notice the subtle connection between her and the CEO, even though neither of them had done anything improper. Still, whispers moved like shadows through the office. "The new temp seems close with Mr. Whitmore," one employee murmured near the break room. "I saw them talking at the event." "Do you think that is why her contract got extended?" another replied. Rachel heard fragments of the gossip and tried to ignore them, but they left a faint ache in her chest. She had worked hard, every number she entered precise, every deadline met, yet now her effort felt diminished by rumors. That afternoon, as she left her desk to grab coffee, she overheard 2 senior analysts laughing quietly. "Maybe I should take the next flight she is on," one joked. "Seems like that is the fastest way to get promoted these days." Her hand froze around her cup. The sting of embarrassment flushed her face. She turned away quickly before they could see her expression. When she returned to her desk, her heart was pounding and her eyes burned. Claire approached a few minutes later, concern in her voice. "Rachel, are you okay?" "I am fine," Rachel said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Claire hesitated but nodded. Later that evening, as Rachel left the office, she nearly collided with James in the hallway. He caught her elbow instinctively. "Rachel, you look upset. Did something happen?" She shook her head, avoiding his gaze. "Everything is fine. I just need to get home." "Rachel," he said softly, "I can tell when something is wrong." She hesitated, the weight of the day pressing down. "People are talking," she finally whispered. "They think I am here because of you." His jaw tightened, a shadow crossing his face. "That is not acceptable." "Please," she said quickly, "do not make it worse. I do not want anyone to think you are defending me because of those rumors." "You earned your place here," he said firmly. "Anyone who cannot see that is blind." "It does not matter what they see," she said quietly. "People believe what they want. I cannot afford to lose this job." Her voice trembled slightly. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then James said gently, "Let me handle it my way. I promise I will not draw attention." She nodded reluctantly and walked away. That night, James sat in his office, long after everyone else had gone home. He could not shake the image of her eyes, tired but steady, full of pride she refused to let anyone crush. He opened his laptop and began drafting an internal message to all staff, a subtle but deliberate reminder about professionalism and respect. He did not mention names, but his point was clear. The next morning, Rachel walked into the office to find the atmosphere different. People avoided making jokes. The whispers had stopped. Claire leaned over and whispered, "Someone must have said something to the boss. He sent out that message at midnight." Rachel's stomach tightened. She appreciated the gesture, but part of her worried it would only confirm what people already suspected. Around noon, as she was sorting invoices, a small email notification appeared on her screen. It was from James. "You do not owe anyone explanations. Keep being yourself. That is enough." She stared at the message, her heart catching in her throat. She typed a reply, deleted it, then typed again before finally sending just 2 words: "Thank you." That evening, as she stepped outside, snow began to fall, thin flakes swirling under the streetlights. She pulled her scarf tighter and smiled faintly. For all the chaos and doubt, there was still something pure about the way he saw her, not as a rumor, not as a mistake, but as a person trying her best in a world that often looked the other way. Somewhere high above in his office, James stood by the window watching the snow too, unaware that miles apart, they were both thinking the same quiet thought. Maybe kindness, once found, was never truly lost. Winter deepened in the city, turning every morning into a blur of frost on windows and clouds of breath in the air. Rachel adjusted to the cold as best she could, wrapping Sophia in thick scarves and mittens each day before dropping her off at the daycare near Carmen's apartment. Her days at Meridian Technologies had become steady again after the rumors faded, but something inside her had shifted. She had begun to look forward to small things, the quiet elevator rides when she sometimes crossed paths with James, the brief nod he gave her during meetings, the rare but genuine smiles that made her heart stutter. Still, she kept her distance. Their worlds were too far apart, and she knew better than to mistake kindness for something more. One Tuesday morning, a new project arrived on her desk, a financial audit for an upcoming charity merger. Claire explained that it was one of the CEO's personal initiatives, a program that provided technology training for single parents trying to rebuild their lives. As Rachel scrolled through the proposal, she froze at a name in the notes: the Whitmore Foundation for Families. The mission statement read, "To give every parent the chance to stand again, with dignity." Her chest tightened. She realized this was not a typical corporate project. It was something deeply personal. That evening, as the office emptied, Rachel stayed behind to finish data entries. The hum of the heating vents filled the silence. She was halfway through the spreadsheet when she noticed a small leather notebook left near her keyboard. It was not hers. When she opened it, she saw neat handwriting across the first page: plans, sketches, even quotes written in blue ink. One line stood out: "We rise by lifting others." It was signed with James's initials. She blinked, unsure whether to return it immediately or wait until morning. The thought of walking into his office again made her pulse quicken. She decided to bring it up now before she lost her nerve. The hallway outside his office was quiet, lights dimmed to save energy after hours. She knocked softly. "Come in," his voice said. He looked up from his desk, surprised but pleased to see her. "Rachel, you are still here." "I found this on my desk," she said, holding out the notebook. "I think it might be yours." His eyes softened. "Thank you. I must have left it when I stopped by accounting earlier." "You have very organized handwriting," she said, smiling nervously. He chuckled quietly. "Old habit. I like writing things down. Computers make everything look too perfect." For a moment, neither spoke. The room felt heavy with quiet warmth, the soft light from the city spilling through the glass wall. Rachel's gaze drifted to the framed photograph on his desk. It showed a younger James with a woman and an older man, likely his parents. The woman's smile was radiant. "Your family?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said, his voice low. "My mother and father. She passed away when I was 25. She believed in helping people who had less. The foundation was her dream." Rachel listened, the respect in her eyes unspoken but clear. "She would be proud," she said gently. He smiled faintly. "I hope so. Sometimes I forget why I started all this. Then someone comes along and reminds me." His gaze lingered on her, and for a moment Rachel forgot to breathe. She looked away quickly, flustered. "Well, I should go. It is getting late." "Rachel," he said softly as she reached the door. She turned, her hand on the knob. "You are doing more than you know," he said. "You have a way of making people remember what matters." The words struck her deeper than he realized. She gave a small nod and left the office. her heart echoing his words all the way to the train. That night, as she lay beside her sleeping daughter, Rachel stared at the ceiling, unable to stop thinking about him. Not the CEO, not the powerful man everyone admired, but the one who carried a notebook filled with hope, who still believed that lifting others could heal what the world had broken. Somewhere across the city, James sat by his window with the same notebook open before him, staring at the line she had read. For the first time in years, the weight of his wealth felt lighter, and the thought of a young mother and her baby made him believe that perhaps his mother's dream was still alive. The next morning, the office buzzed with quiet anticipation. James was scheduled to visit the accounting department for the first time since Rachel had joined. The news spread quickly, and everyone made sure their desks were spotless. Rachel tried to focus on her work, pretending not to care, but her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the stack of reports on her desk. Claire whispered with a grin, "Relax. He is just another human being." Rachel smiled nervously. "Maybe to you." When James arrived, the room seemed to straighten on its own. His presence carried authority without effort. He moved from desk to desk, asking thoughtful questions, complimenting work where it was due. When he reached Rachel's corner, her heart stilled. "Miss Martinez," he said formally, though there was a glint of warmth in his tone. "How are the audit reports coming along?" "Almost finished, Mr. Whitmore," she said, keeping her voice steady. "We are verifying the last batch of data before final submission." "Good," he replied. "I appreciate the precision. It makes a difference." She looked up, and their eyes met briefly. For a moment, the bustling office disappeared, replaced by the memory of a quiet flight and a baby asleep between them. Then Claire's voice broke the spell, asking a question about the next project. James turned to answer, his professionalism seamless, but Rachel caught the faintest trace of a smile as he walked away. That afternoon, an unexpected call came to Rachel's desk. "Miss Martinez," the receptionist said through the line. "Mr. Whitmore would like to see you in his office when you have a moment." Her pulse quickened. "Of course," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. When she arrived upstairs, James stood by the window again, the Chicago skyline stretching behind him. "You wanted to see me?" she asked softly. He turned, his expression calm. "Yes, please, sit." She did. "I wanted to thank you personally for your work on the foundation audit," he began. "The numbers checked out perfectly. You caught a mistake in the funding transfer that everyone else missed." Rachel blinked. "I did not realize it was that important." "It saved us nearly $50,000, he said simply. "That is important." She laughed lightly. "Then I am glad I stayed late that night." His eyes softened. "You have a habit of doing that, staying late, fixing things quietly." "Old habits," she said, smiling. "When you are a single mom, you learn to handle everything before it falls apart. And yet you still find time to help others," he said. "Claire told me you helped one of the interns prepare for her exam." Rachel blushed. She was nervous. "I just shared a few tips." "It matters," he said quietly. "Those small acts, they build the kind of company my mother wanted." She hesitated, then asked, "Is that why you started the foundation? For her?" He nodded. "She used to say that helping someone get back on their feet is the only real kind of power worth having." Rachel looked down, her throat tight. "She sounds like she was a wonderful person." "She was," he said softly, "and I think she would have liked you." The words hung in the air, gentle but heavy. Rachel's heart raced, unsure how to respond. She glanced at her hands, twisting the edge of a folder nervously. "I am not sure I deserve that," she said. "You do," he said. "More than most people I know." The quiet stretched again, not uncomfortable but charged with something unspoken. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He sighed and silenced it. "Duty calls." Rachel stood. "I should get back to work." He nodded. "Rachel," he said as she reached the door, "do not let anyone make you feel small for where you started. People forget that strength often looks like survival." She smiled faintly, her eyes bright. "Thank you, James." As she left, his gaze lingered on her reflection in the glass. Downstairs, as she walked back to her desk, Rachel felt something she had not felt in years, a quiet pride. For once, she was not just surviving. She was being seen. Outside, the sky had turned pale with the hint of snow again, and somewhere deep inside her, Rachel began to believe that maybe life was changing, not because of luck, but because she had never stopped trying. The following week brought change that no one in the accounting department expected. News spread that Meridian Technologies would be undergoing a surprise internal audit before the next quarter, and the entire team was instructed to prepare updated records within 7 days. Rachel felt the pressure immediately, but instead of fear, she felt determination. This was her chance to prove that her position had never been a gift, it had been earned. She organized her files with meticulous care, staying late each night after everyone had gone home. Claire offered to help, but Rachel gently refused. "Go home," she said. "You have done enough. I will finish this." What she did not know was that James noticed. From the glass balcony of his office, he could see the faint glow of her desk lamp long after the building had emptied. One evening, he walked down quietly, the sound of his shoes soft against the polished floor. "You should not be here this late," he said, his voice low but warm. Rachel looked up from her computer, startled but smiling. "I am just trying to make sure everything is ready before the auditors come." "You do not need to do it alone," he said. "You have a whole department for that." "I have been alone most of my life," she said softly, still typing. "This is not so bad." He stepped closer, watching the screen where numbers scrolled endlessly. "You remind me of myself when I first started. Obsessed with getting everything perfect. The truth is, it is never perfect. It is just honest." She stopped typing and looked at him. "Is that what you think this company is, honest?" He smiled faintly. "It is what I am trying to make it." Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then a noise from the hallway broke the stillness, security doing rounds. Rachel straightened, remembering where she was. "You should probably let me finish this," she said lightly. "If you stay, people will start rumors again." "Let them," he said quietly, almost to himself. "They would not understand anyway." She hesitated, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Before she could respond, he took a small envelope from his jacket and placed it on her desk. "This came to my office by mistake," he said. "It is addressed to you." She picked it up, frowning slightly. The return label read, "The Whitmore Foundation." Inside was a letter offering her a position as financial coordinator for the charity's upcoming project launch. "I do not understand," she said. "Is this a recommendation?" he said before she could finish. "You deserve it. You have the experience, and the foundation needs someone who understands both the work and the people behind it." "James," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I cannot accept something like this because of you." "It is not because of me," he said gently. "It is because of what you have done." She looked at the paper again, her hands trembling slightly. "I do not even know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply, "and promise me something." "What?" she asked. "Promise me that you will never think you owe me anything. You have earned every door that opens for you." The sincerity in his voice left her speechless. "I will think about it," she said finally. "But thank you for believing in me." "You make it easy," he said quietly. As he turned to leave, she watched him go, the letter still warm in her hand. That night, on the train ride home, Rachel stared out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of gold. She thought of how far she had come from the frightened woman on the plane, exhausted and invisible, to someone being offered a chance to change lives. When she reached Carmen's apartment, Sophia was still awake, her small hands reaching out for her mother. Rachel lifted her up, kissing her forehead. "Mommy got some good news today," she whispered. "I think maybe life is finally turning a corner for us." In another part of the city, James stood alone on his balcony, watching the snow begin to fall again. For the first time in years, he felt something that money had never given him, a sense of quiet peace. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing with certainty. He had done the right thing by believing in her. The following days moved faster than Rachel could process. The letter from the Whitmore Foundation had felt like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Yet the next morning, the official offer arrived through email. It outlined a full-time position with benefits, flexible hours, and a salary that could finally give her and Sophia stability. Carmen cried when Rachel told her. "You see," she said, hugging her tightly, "good things happen to people who keep doing the right thing." But Rachel hesitated before accepting. A small voice inside her wondered if this was really her accomplishment, or if James's influence had quietly tilted the scales. That doubt stayed with her as she rode the train downtown the next morning, the city still wet from an early rain. When she arrived at the office, she found James waiting near the elevator lobby, dressed simply in a dark coat and scarf instead of his usual suit. "You read the offer?" he asked. She nodded. "I did. It is generous." "You earned it," he said. "You do not have to question it." "But I do," she replied softly. "People already think I am here because of you. If I accept this, it will only confirm it." He studied her expression for a long moment. "Rachel, I cannot change what people think, but I can make sure the truth stays clean. You are being offered the job because you have value, not because I feel sorry for you." His words carried quiet strength, the kind that made her want to believe. "Still," she said, "it feels too big, too fast." "Maybe it is time something good came fast," he said. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. Before it closed, she said softly, "I will think about it one more day." That evening, Rachel stayed late again, going over the Foundation's project files. The more she read, the more she saw its heart-training programs for struggling parents, grants for single mothers, partnerships with schools. It was everything she had once wished someone had offered her. She realized it was not just a job, it was a chance to be the person she had needed years ago. Across the city, James sat in his office reviewing the final report from the internal audit. Carter entered, placing a folder on his desk. "Everything checks out," he said. "The team did a clean job." James nodded. "Make sure the accounting department gets credit, especially Rachel Martinez." Carter smiled slightly. "You really believe in her?" "I do," James said simply, "because she reminds me of what this company was supposed to stand for before we lost our way." The next morning, Rachel walked into his office unannounced, holding the signed acceptance letter. "I will take the job," she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "But on one condition." "Name it," he said, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "No more favors," she said. "If I succeed, it will be because I earned it. If I fail, it will be because I was not good enough. Deal?" A small smile touched his lips. "Deal." She extended her hand, and he shook it. For a moment, the world outside the glass walls seemed to disappear. "When do I start?" she asked. "Monday," he said. "The team will brief you at the Foundation headquarters. I will visit later in the week." "I will be ready," she said. As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Rachel, thank you for saying yes." She glanced over her shoulder, smiling faintly. "You should thank your mother," she said. "It was her dream, not mine. I am just helping you finish it." That night, Rachel returned home with a lightness she had not felt in years. Sophia toddled toward her, laughing, and Rachel lifted her up, spinning gently in the small living room. "We did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "We finally did it." Outside, snow fell softly again, covering the city in quiet silver. In another part of town, James looked at an old photo of his mother and whispered the same words Rachel had said hours earlier. "We did it. Two people, standing under different roofs, but bound by one thing. Neither of them expected kindness that had turned into destiny." The first morning at the Whitmore Foundation arrived with soft light breaking through a pale winter sky. Rachel stood outside the glass building holding Sophia's small hand. Her daughter, now walking confidently, wore a bright pink coat and clutched a tiny stuffed rabbit. Rachel smiled down at her. "You ready to see where Mommy works now?" Sophia nodded, her little voice bright. "Yes, Mommy." Inside, the lobby was filled with warm light, photos of families, and words etched in gold across the wall. "Hope begins with a hand." Rachel's eyes lingered on the phrase. It reminded her of that night on the airplane when a stranger had extended a quiet hand to help her. She could never have imagined how far that single moment of kindness would carry her. The team welcomed her warmly, guiding her to her new office. It was modest but bright, with a window overlooking the park below. On the desk sat a single white envelope with her name written in careful handwriting. She opened it and found a short note. "Congratulations, Rachel. I believe in what you are about to build. James." Her throat tightened. She placed the note in her drawer, knowing she would keep it forever. Over the next few weeks, Rachel threw herself into the work. She helped design new grant programs for single parents, reviewed applications, and personally visited local shelters to understand what people truly needed. The job was demanding, but it felt meaningful in a way her old life never had. She was not just surviving anymore, she was helping others find their footing. One afternoon, during a community event, she noticed a small crowd forming near the entrance. When she turned, James was there, dressed simply in a charcoal coat. The room seemed to still as he approached. "Mr. Whitmore," one of the volunteers greeted warmly. "We did not expect you today." "I could not stay away," he said with a smile, but his eyes were fixed on Rachel. She stepped forward, unsure whether to call him James or keep it formal. "You found the place," she said softly. "I did," he replied, "and I see you have already made it better." "We all have," she said. "It is not just me." "Maybe," he said, "but it started with you." The two of them walked through the foundation's halls, stopping occasionally to speak with staff. When they reached the main lobby, James paused before the wall of names, the donors and founders who had built the charity. His mother's name was at the top. "She would have liked you," he said quietly. "You remind me of her, not because of what you do, but because of why you do it." Rachel looked at him, her voice gentle. "She must have been a remarkable woman to raise someone like you." He smiled faintly, emotion flickering behind his calm exterior. "I think she would say the same about you and your daughter." There was a long, comfortable silence between them. The air carried a warmth that had nothing to do with the heaters. "You once told me," Rachel said, "that people forget what real strength looks like. I think I finally understand. It is not power or money. It is being kind even when life gives you every reason not to be." He looked at her, admiration in his gaze. "You taught me that." Later that evening, as the event ended and the crowd dispersed, James stood by the door as Rachel packed up a few remaining files. "You know," he said softly, "it all started with a flight I never planned to take, and a seat I never expected to afford," she replied with a laugh. "Fate can be strange. Maybe not strange," he said. "Maybe just right." She met his eyes, and in that quiet moment, something wordless passed between them, a recognition of everything they had endured and everything they had become. When Rachel left that night, the city lights shimmered across the snow, and she felt no trace of the woman who had once cried herself to sleep in fear of tomorrow. She was walking toward a future she had built with her own hands, guided by kindness and second chances. Somewhere above her, in his office overlooking the skyline, James watched her go, the faintest smile touching his lips. "You reminded me what it means to be human," he whispered. And as the snow continued to fall, the world felt, for once, perfectly still, a quiet ending born not from luck, but from love that had begun with a single act of grace. In this emotional and cinematic journey of fate, love, and redemption, a struggling single mother's act of kindness changes the life of a powerful CEO forever. This heart-touching story blends hope, resilience, and second chances into a deeply human narrative that defines the true spirit of millionaire stories. From an unexpected meeting on a flight to a life rebuilt through empathy and courage, every moment reminds us that compassion can bridge the distance between two worlds. Crafted with rich emotion and cinematic detail, this tale stands among the most inspiring millionaire stories that celebrate humility over power and heart over wealth. As destiny unfolds, two souls find redemption not through fortune but through kindness, reminding us that the most unforgettable millionaire stories are not about money. They are about becoming human again. Perfect for fans of dramatic storytelling, healing emotions, and timeless love, this is one of those millionaire stories that leave a mark on the heart and soul.